As a creative professional, you often focus on honing your skills, developing your brand, and perfecting your craft, doing the things that creative professionals are supposed to do. But there's another crucial skill that many creative professionals overlook, and that's financial acumen. I work with a lot of creative professionals who think that they need to focus solely on their craft and let the finances take care of themselves. But I find that a lack of financial knowledge has serious consequences for you and your business. So, in this podcast, I'm going to discuss why financial literacy is important for you as a creative professional and how a lack of it can be costing you serious money. First of all, let's start with why financial literacy is important for you as a creative professional. Creatives often have unpredictable income and variable expenses. What do I mean by that? One way that I like to describe creative professionals' income streams is lumpy. You might sell a project that brings in a windfall of cash one month, but then you spend the next couple months working on that project. So you have lots of income one month. If we're looking month over month, you have lots of income one month, and then for the next couple of months, you have none. Yet you have fixed expenses that you have to keep paying that whole time. You need to live. You have to keep buying yourself food and paying your rent or mortgage. You might have a lot of other expenses that you've got to pay as well. So your income relative to your fixed expenses, both business and personal, is lumpy. It goes up and down over time. Or you might sign up a new client and have some sort of setup fee or original discovery fee or consultation fee, and that bumps your income up. So even if you have recurring fee or recurring revenue or subscription revenue, you'll still have a bump in income from one month to the next. So it's difficult if you have that kind of lumpy income stream to smooth that out mentally and think about managing your finances month to month, week to week, quarter to quarter, however often you're thinking about breaking down your finances. You also might have variable expenses related to those lumpy income streams. So if you take on a project and you're going to need to hire contractors to help you complete that project, that's going to increase your expenses in the upcoming weeks or months relative to that project. This is going to be very important when we start thinking about how you're pricing and billing your work. If you bill up front for that project, then you'll have the cash to be able to pay those contractors to get the project completed. On the other hand, if you bill after the fact, or even if you bill partially up front, then you're going to have some cash flow needs when it comes to paying those contractors to do the work, but you may not necessarily have enough cash revenue from that project collected in order to pay those related expenses. So we've got to think about how both your income stream and your variable expenses, as well as fixed and personal expenses, all line up. And that can very easily and very quickly get out of hand as your business starts to grow. You also need to understand how to budget, save, and invest your money. When you become profitable, you should hopefully start having more money than you need just to operate your business. So you might have some margin there that you need to think about how you're either going to invest that back into your business, or how you might set some of that aside to save, either for business growth and expansion in the future or for your own personal needs. You might be saving up to buy a house or to buy a car. And then you also need to be thinking about investing for the long term, again, both in your business and personally. You need to start looking at retirement, for example. Even if you're in your 20s or 30s, you need to be thinking about your retirement. So you have all of these different needs for your money, for your cash today, but you have to balance that with thinking about your long-term needs as well as your medium-term needs, the things that you're saving up for, maybe not this year, maybe not even next year, but within the next couple years. So how do you balance all of these different cash needs when your cash is in a limited supply? Good financial management can lead to greater stability and success. And this is where I really see the greatest benefit of having strong financial acumen as a creative professional and as a business owner. You can be in control of your customer relationships, of choosing which prospective customers you want to take on, and what kinds of work you want to do when your finances are in good order. Now, when your finances aren't in good order, when you're not sure how much money you're making, how much money you need to spend, where your money is at, when you're not sure of those things, you become much more prone to take on work that you're not really well suited for, to take on customers that you're not a good fit with, and then to keep working with customers that are making excessive demands on you, that aren't treating you well, that aren't paying you enough. And so you lose control over those relationships, over your business, and ultimately over your entire life. And that's not a good situation. That's not where you want to be. That's not where you want to be spending your focus. And it's not how you want to be living as a creative professional and as a business owner. A lot of business owners reach a point to where they think that kind of lifestyle is normal, where they have to put up with cranky, demanding customers, where they have to put up with not getting paid well enough, where they have to put up with doing work that they're not really well suited for or that they don't actually want to be doing in order to keep making money. And that's just not true. You can have a business where you're doing work you want to do for clients you want to work with and living a lifestyle that you want to live. What are some of the common pitfalls that I've seen for creatives when it comes to money? One of the most important ones is underestimating the importance of financial record keeping and planning. You can't know how much money you need if you don't know how much money you have, where it's coming from, and where it's going. Now, I work with a lot of creative professionals and they come to me when they have spreadsheets. Maybe they have some sales software that they're using, something that they're using to send proposals and send invoices and collect payments. But what they're often lacking is a comprehensive accounting system. They're often lacking something where they can push a button and know in one click how much money they have, where it's coming from, and where it needs to go. So I help them put that together, build that out, whether that's in the form of an accounting system or a bookkeeping system such as QuickBooks Online, or it might be in the form of a dashboard. Now, if they have financial data that are already running through a bookkeeping system like QuickBooks Online, then it's going to be very easy to take that to the next level and build out a dashboard where instead of seeing financial reports that are written from an accounting perspective that may not have a lot of relevant information for them, or it may not be presenting that information in an intuitive way, I can take that information, turn that into a dashboard that presents key performance indicators or KPIs that are going to be relevant and timely for that business owner or for that creative professional. And so that's another service that I do as an accountant. It all depends on what the business owner needs. It all depends on what you need. What do you need in order to feel comfortable about your finances? What do you need in order to feel comfortable about understanding how your business is performing from a financial perspective? And if we can put that information into as concise and preferably visual a way as possible to where you're not just looking at tables of numbers, but maybe you're looking at some charts or some graphs so that you've got an idea of whether your business is growing or not, whether there's enough cash in the bank or not, how long into the future your business can continue to operate if you fell on hard times and couldn't find paying customers for a while. Questions like that, questions that keep creative professionals and business owners up at night, are the kinds of questions that I help answer for them to give them that peace of mind to make it to where they can sleep at night. Another common pitfall that I see is failing to set aside money for taxes. This is one of the most common ones. It's easy to work all year long and be making money, bringing in, collecting payments, and then paying money out for expenses and at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, feel like there's just not that much left, that what you brought in minus what you paid out, is there's just not much left. And so you're not thinking about the inevitable tax bill that's going to come up in a few months, right? You're not thinking about the fact that you need to be making quarterly estimated payments on a certain schedule, that the IRS and maybe even your state revenue agency want to see those payments made. So if you're not setting aside a portion of either your revenue whenever you get paid or your profit periodically, either monthly or maybe quarterly, if you're not setting that money aside, then you might run into issues when it comes tax time. There are a couple different strategies that we can use to help you be prepared for taxes and to help you be paying in throughout the year. And it's just a matter of what works best for you to make sure that you feel comfortable and that you stay on top of that tax liability. Not having a plan for irregular income is another issue that I deal with my customers quite often. Like I mentioned before, a lot of creative professionals and the businesses that they run have lumpy income streams. You might sell a big project one month and then not sell another big project for the rest of that quarter. Maybe you've got a little bit of recurring revenue, maybe you've got some subscription service, but really the bulk of your revenue is still coming from selling one-off relatively high price projects. So you're not sure when the next big round of revenue is going to come into your business. So how do we make sure that cash collected from those payments actually lasts as long as we need it to? This is another issue that we have to deal with. And this is where something that typical financial reports that might come out of your bookkeeping software, they're not incredibly helpful. They'll show you how much money you collected. They might even show you how much money you're due in terms of your accounts receivable if you're sending out invoices and waiting for payments. And that's all helpful information to have. But it may not be intuitive the way those reports are presented to you and the way they're laid out. It may not be intuitive to you how much cash you actually need to survive the next quarter or the next 6 months in your business. So we can put together a dashboard that will help answer those questions. And then one of the biggest pitfalls that I see, and this is with virtually all creative professionals from a range of industries. I primarily work with marketers and those in sort of the web design space, a lot of these fields that are on the periphery of marketing or related to marketing and advertising and helping businesses with their marketing and sales. So I'm primarily dealing with those kinds of businesses, but in lots of other professional services, such as law and accounting. I talk with a lot of other accountants who also deal with this pitfall, which is not setting prices that reflect fair pay for your expertise, for your skill, for the unique value proposition that you have. One problem there is that a lot of creative professionals and other professionals just don't have a clear, unique value proposition. They've essentially commoditized themselves. They're doing the same thing that a lot of other firms and agencies in their space are doing, and they don't really have a clear reason or rationale to work with them as opposed to others, except for being able to compete on price. And that will always push prices down. It never pushes prices up. So one of the things that is really beyond the scope of what I do as an accountant, but that I find myself working with my clients a lot on, is having discussions around what differentiates you within your field. What makes me as a consumer, as a potential customer, want to do business with you as opposed to somebody else in your space? And if we can work on that, and if we can develop that, and we can relate that back to the expertise and the skill that you bring to the market, then we can start thinking about pricing that appropriately. And not necessarily pricing it in such a way that makes you competitive with others in your field, because that's exactly what we're trying to move away from. We're trying to differentiate you so that you're not competing on price. You're competing on expertise. You're competing on your customer's experience in working with you, and that will drive your price up. When you start driving your prices up, you'll find that not only does revenue start to go up, but actually your workload starts to go down. Your lifestyle begins to improve. Your stress levels begin to even out. So there's a lot that can happen just by thinking about pricing. And before we can even start thinking about pricing, starting to think about how you're differentiating yourself. And again, this is well beyond the scope of what I typically do as an accountant. But as an accountant, I'm usually one of, if not the primary advisors to my customers. So we end up talking about that a lot because pricing is one of those things that's going to have a pretty dramatic effect on your revenue and therefore on your finances. And in order to get your pricing right, we have to think about getting your offering right. And in order to get that right, we've got to think about your positioning within the marketplace. Some of the potential costs of having a lack of financial acumen can really start to pile up and compound if you're not careful. One of those potential costs is missing opportunities for growth and advancement. So already, if you're not thinking well about your pricing, and I consider pricing strategy part of your financial acumen, it's probably because you haven't established clear positioning and therefore a clear differentiation within the marketplace. This is going to lead you to compete on price, and so you might start accepting lower value or more labor intensive customer work because you're worried about generating enough revenue. Well, if you start taking on lower value, more intensive work, you're going to start limiting your capacity to accept higher value work when it becomes available. Or you might not even be positioning yourself in the marketplace to be ready to take on that kind of work. So it's not just that your lack of financial acumen is making it more difficult to understand the money that's within your business. You might actually be costing yourself new business, new revenue, and at the same time increasing the cost of earning the revenue that you've already got coming in. It's also going to be incredibly difficult to manage your cash flow and therefore to make ends meet. Now, we've all experienced having more month than money, right? We've all gotten to the 25th, 26th, 27th of the month and the bank account has hit zero and we still have more bills to pay. We still have more groceries we need to buy. We still need more cash in order to keep going. Now, there are a few options if you're in that situation, but those are generally all short-term options and they come at a relatively high cost. If we're backing up and we're thinking about cash flow and managing our cash flow better and making sure that we have clear runway several months into the future, not just a week or a month into the future, but several months into the future, and we're thinking about pricing in such a way that makes it possible to raise more revenue while not increasing costs, right, then we can avoid a lot of the problems that come along with having weak or maybe even negative cash flow problems. And then, of course, the result of all that is going to be increased stress and anxiety about money. And this is where the wheels really start to come off the wagon because it's not just about having a cash flow issue this month, but now that rolls into the next month. And then that rolls into the next quarter. And pretty soon you are way off track when it comes to keeping up with your business's financial needs. Now, you might think at first that you can hide that from your customers, from your colleagues, maybe even your family, but the stress will immediately start to bleed over into your relationships and your work. Again, you're going to start scrounging for revenue. You're going to start accepting work from customers who aren't a good fit at prices that don't make sense given your level of expertise and skill and under terms that you don't want to be working under. You're going to find yourself very quickly in a bad place. And that's only going to make the stress and the anxiety and the worry compound even faster, which is going to put you in a mental space to where you're going to make even more mistakes. You're going to make even more rash decisions, and the money situation is going to get even worse. It'll be a downward spiral, and it'll be one that will put you in a bad place a lot faster than you can even realize. So we need to avoid this. So how can you improve your financial literacy as a creative professional? What's going to be the best way to make sure that you're not getting yourself into these bad positions by understanding your business's finances as well as your personal finances. Obviously, you need to educate yourself about basic financial concepts and principles. And that's going to be a lot of what I talk about in future episodes of this show. So I'm really honing in on helping creative professionals and small business owners, especially in those creative spaces around marketing, related to marketing, think about and understand how these financial concepts and principles matter to them. One thing that a lot of accountants and even financial advisors do is talk about and try to educate on a lot of these financial concepts and principles, but they do so in a way that is either academic or it's condescending or it's really not tied and related to day-to-day life or your industry or your actual needs in the moment. I want to try to avoid all of that and make these principles and concepts important to you and help you understand and see why they're important to you. Now, obviously, I am a professional myself who is selling services and selling my expertise. So, my next suggestion is always going to be to hire a qualified advisor, somebody who is qualified to advise you on taxes, on business, and even a little bit on personal finance. Now, you might wind up, depending on your situation, where you need to hire a few different professionals. There are going to be some questions that I, as an accountant, as a CPA, and as a tax advisor, there are going to be some things that I just can't help you with because my license doesn't include those kinds of topics. So there are going to be legal questions that come up and you might need to consult with an attorney. There are going to be investing decisions once you start putting money into the stock market for your retirement, for example, and you'll need to talk to an investment advisor for those kinds of things. You'll want insurance for your business, professional insurance. You'll want insurance in your personal life as well, life insurance, health insurance. So you'll need to talk to an insurance agent or an insurance broker about those kinds of issues. But here's the thing is that I'm always going to be the person who is going to help you as your tax and business and personal finance advisor. I'm going to be the person who is helping you think out on a strategic level what you need to be doing and what you need to be thinking about doing. And then once we get into the tactics, once we get into the implementation of those strategies, then if I can't do it, we're going to work together to find somebody who will work with you and can help you get the implementation done. But as far as thinking on a strategic level, that's where I'm going to be helping you. That's where you and I are going to be working together. We're going to be having calls. We're going to be obviously staying in touch over email. And when it comes time to actually implement strategy, you and I together are going to be talking to these other professionals that are going to be helping you out with that. So really the next key here, after you start to educate yourself a little bit on some basic financial literacy and concepts and principles, is to find somebody that you click with and start working with that person who can advise you from a holistic financial perspective: tax, business, personal finance. Then when we actually start working through some of these strategic issues, we need to make sure that we're clear on what the priorities are and the order of operations that we're going to do things in, and especially what your basic commitments are on a monthly, quarterly, and annual level. And all of this is going to get summarized into a budget. You have to have a budget, and you probably heard a lot of financial advisors say this, a lot of people in the media who talk about finance. They always bring up the budget, and nobody wants to budget. And I understand that. In fact, to the point to which I don't have an explicit budget. What I do have, though, is automations built into our personal finance to where even though we don't have this explicitly spelled out anywhere, my wife and I know where our money's coming from and where it's going to go. And it just does it on its own through the automations we built really into our banking system, as well as having our bills on auto pay. So we know how much is coming in, we know where it's going, and we know how much is going to be left over, and therefore how much we have to spend on things that are outside the budget. Things that are going to lunch or buying a new toy for our daughter or taking our daughter out for the afternoon and getting snacks and having a nice dinner together. All those kinds of things that make life worth living that you resist having a budget for because you don't want to miss out on that stuff. Here's the thing is you're going to miss out on those things because you don't have a budget. You're going to miss out on those things because you're going to have more month than money, and you're going to keep running into that problem to where you're having to deny yourself those opportunities because you don't have a plan, because you don't have the automation set up that give you the free will and the cash to pay for those opportunities and those experiences. So that's going to be part of what we're going to work on as well if we're working together. And then finally, on a most basic level, we've got to make sure that your major financial commitments are all taken care of, that you are paying down debt if you have any, that you're setting aside money and making your estimated payments for your taxes, that you're saving for your medium-term purchases, and that you're investing for the long term. Financial literacy is a crucial skill for everyone, really, but it's especially important for creative professionals as business owners. So by understanding the basics of personal finance, you can avoid some of these common pitfalls that I see my customers suffer through and set yourself up for long-term success. And that's ultimately my goal for you. You will have your own vision, your own desires when it comes to what you want to see out of your life and how finances is going to help fund that. It's my job to help you fulfill that vision, to fulfill those goals. Investing in your financial knowledge can pay off in the form of both greater stability on a day-to-day basis as well as increased earning potential, both today, making more money today, and having more money in the future.